Just like to say that there's no volume. I'm not sure if you've started yet or.
No, we haven't started, but I think you're chairing this. Is that correct, Penny?
Me?
Aren't you for the EA Directors Committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
With that, yes. And so whenever you're ready, we have we do have quorum. Staff are here, and Director Roth is here, so we could start anytime we're ready.
All right. I don't have a agenda, so is there one?
There is an agenda. Hold on a minute. I will. I'm forwarding one to you right away.
Thank you. So we'll just take a moment then.
No problem. I forwarded an email to you that has the agenda link.
Thank you. Okay, so I will call this, where are we? Electoral Area Directors Committee meeting to order, and recognize that we are coming from the traditional territories, from the office and my own place. Coming from is from the Tishat and Upachesset First Nation. And I'd like to say notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the regional district website. So introduction. So the committee members and staff present in the boardroom would be, Daniel, I'll let you take care of that.
Yes, we have Director Susan Roth here as the elected official, and the rest are staff. There's our planner, Amy Anaka. There is our planning manager, Alex Dyer. And there is our planning general manager, Mike Erg. And there's myself, the CAO, Daniel Sayan.
Thank you. So then we'll go to those board members that are on Zoom. So we'll go to Fred first, and then Bob, and then myself.
Good morning, Fred Boyko, Beaufort Area Director.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Bob Beckett, Area A, Banfield.
Thank you. And I believe we have Janice Hill on Zoom as well. Staff. Okay. So we have an agenda before us. So motion to receive the agenda. Thank you, Bob, and seconded by Fred. All right. And all in favor? I believe okay, that's good. All right, okay, that's carried. So request for decisions, administrative memorandum, zoning bylaw review project, November 2022, update and next steps. So that would be Amy, I'm sure.
I'm going to start us off. That's okay. Really,
thank you, Mr.
So I just want to introduce the sort of the meeting and the staff. So Amy Anaka and Alex Dyer are going to lead the discussion and just a review of where we're at with the zoning bylaw. Just thought it would be a good opportunity to have this time with the new board, give an update. We've had a lot of public feedback. I think a lot of directors have had a lot of feedback, and just want to identify those areas where we've heard concerns and talk about how the proposed new bylaw relates to the current bylaw and what changes have been made since the last update. And I just want to note that included in the agenda package is a memo which provides a lot of the background information on the project and highlights sort of the process over the last couple of years. We've also had engagement with a variety of agencies and the community, including First Nations, the public, the advisory planning commissions, etc. The memo also outlines the presentation before you, which Amy and Alex will run through, and will focus on the benefits and impacts of the updated zoning bylaw, and really want to get feedback and questions from the directors about where we're going on this. And just want to note too that so this bylaw has, well, we've been working on it for a long time. We've had a lot of public consultation, which they're going to, Amy and Alex will talk about. It still hasn't had first reading. So there's lots of opportunity to make changes. One of the goals from when we first started this project was, as staff, we wanted to do that engagement ahead of time, rather than it's much easier to just amend something that hasn't had a reading based on the feedback and input we get then, as opposed to when you get the first reading. The goal is that the majority of the public is understanding and hopefully supportive of the project before we take it for first reading. So I will stop there and turn it over to Amy and Alex.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. I think this is my first official presentation to the new committee, so excited to be here. Also sort of adjusting to the new format or the old way of doing things of standing here for presentations. So here we are. Before Alex gets into the meat of some of the current and proposed regulation, I'm going to walk you through a few slides on some of the background, why we're doing this project. So the slide before you here is just a reminder for those of you who don't know that there is a project webpage on the zoning bylaw review, and staff try and keep it updated quite regularly. There's a lot of information on there, but we've tried to set it up in an easily digestible format. So on the top of the webpage, there is the most recent version of the draft zoning bylaw. And so that was made available in October. And so something we changed with this draft version is we've now included a version that shows the track changes. So there's two versions. So this one shows track changes, and it literally has everything sort of redlined or shown where we've made changes from the March version. So we've already received some positive feedback on that's helpful, that people can go and see exactly what's been proposed and updated based on all the engagement we've done over the last few months. So I wanted to say that. And then the other thing is that on the project website, there are draft zoning maps. And so as Mike mentioned earlier this morning, those maps are still static, they're in PDF, but we are working on an updated or a new sort of IMAP or online web portal. So as part of that, when that's released, the zoning will be incorporated into that. So people will be able to look up once it's adopted, their zoning. So all very helpful information. Of course, there's some other background information on that webpage, the Fish and Community Plan Amendment bylaws, all the information on those, when the dates of the public hearings are, as well as the anticipated timelines and next steps, which we try and keep that updated. So encourage people to visit that website. So why are we reviewing the zoning bylaw? As Mike mentioned, planning staff have been working on this for a number of years. We've worked with many different people, community groups, First Nations, lots of meetings with the EA directors and the board and whatnot. And really this project represents the first comprehensive rewrite of this bylaw, because it is old, as you can see in the images on the screen there. 1973, thought it'd be fun to sort of, I think, Nanaimo is sort of a similar thing with updating their bylaw. It's 50 years old. So I tried to find some pictures of 1973 of the Verde Valley, and honestly, that's what I came up with. The one on the left is Cherry Creek Elementary School, and some of you might actually know who some of those people are in there, but it's just represents how old our bylaw is. So it is well overdue for an update. Also, it's been amended, the screen says 700 times, probably more like 1,000 times. There's been a lot of amendments that have not been incorporated into the bylaw, so it's definitely well overdue. As well, the overall goal of the project is really to provide more clarity, certainty, and then relevancy than in the current zoning bylaw. So as Mike mentioned in the agenda package, there is a memo with some information on the context of community planning and land use planning in the region, as well as just sort of touching on how the official community plans set out the long-term vision for, growth and development within the region and throughout the communities. So really the zoning bylaw implements the community visions that are in the official community plans and really on the ground by, regulating how land, buildings, other structures are sort of used. So Mike sort of introduced some of that this morning in Planning 101. As well, there are a number of reasons why the zoning bylaw is being updated. One of the most important is, from a long-range planning perspective, is to implement the policies in the OCPs. So you're going to hear us say that over and over again, but it's very important that the zoning aligns with the official community plans. They must align. And so that's also the basis for the official community plan amendment bylaws that are currently being considered. So we'll go over those shortly. Before I move on, I just wanted to provide a couple examples of current policies in the OCPs that are not included in the current zoning bylaw, just so there's a better understanding of why we're doing this. So the first is home industry. So in the current official community plans, there are policies that permit home industry, but it's not allowed or permitted in the current zoning bylaw. So that is an example of something that we've proposed to permit. And we won't go into the weeds too much about home industry, but, on larger properties, larger than 2 hectares and things like that. The next example is proposed regulation in the zoning bylaw to expand home occupation use. So right now, home occupation use is allowed in the OCPs. It is permitted in the current zoning bylaw, but what we're proposing to do is expand the use. So you right now, you can only have home occupation in a single family dwelling. We are proposing to expand that use in an accessory dwelling unit, an accessory building, or a combination. So just providing some more flexibility with things like that. And then Alex will go into a couple more details on this, but another objective of the zoning bylaw is really to improve housing options, of course, a super dominant or a prominent topic right now. An example of that is having a standardized minimum lot size, as well as a standardized minimum accessory dwelling unit size across all 6 EAs, because right now it varies between them. So just some examples of why. And then walking through some of the key changes. So there is a list on the slide there in front of you, highlighting some of the key changes that we are proposing in the updated draft. But really, like we said before, we're hoping to modernize the language, the look of it, improve readability and things like that. And really in a manner that limits impact on property owners and well as better aligns with provincial regulations. Provincial regulations are always changing, so we've updated it based on, the current regulation as much as possible. Updating the zoning bylaw will also allow for more efficient and effective public service, communication with the public and whatnot, easier to understand, greater flexibility and community-minded development. We've already said this, improved efficiency and consistency, and then, reaches out into, building inspection and things like that. So really this will be key for, have an impact on other things. As well as it'll help administer development regulations regarding the use. So people can just clearly understand, look up their zone, what they're allowed to do in it. And the 2 images on the bottom there. So the bottom left one is just an example of the 1973 zoning bylaw and how it's hard to read. So if you're wanting to know how dense your property can be, how many units you could have on it, it's just literally in some text in within the zone. And on the right, we've proposed to put it in a table based on lot size. I know you can probably not read it when we send these slides out. So basically you can say, my property is, greater than 4 hectares. This is exactly how many dwelling units I'm allowed 2, and they could be made up of this and that. So just providing more clarity there. As well, in many cases, the October 2022 draft is more permissive than the current zoning bylaw regulations. So Alex will go over a number of those in more detail in a few minutes. This slide here, I've tried to capture or highlight, the engagement and some of the activities have been done over a number of years. So you'll see here that every time we've updated the zoning bylaw draft, we have put it out online and made it available, as well as the past versions are still available on the project website. We've done numerous open houses, which have been so beneficial, just being able to have those conversations face to face with people. In April, I think it was, we did a hybrid, we did some online ones, we were able to do in person, which was great. So all very beneficial. We had a great response to an online survey we did in 2021 where we had a lot of information, but we received so much great feedback and detailed responses on that on a number of key topics. We've had lots of advisory planning commission meetings, which have been very, very, the feedback in those has been very beneficial. And we've also, of course, had different engagement with, the board, First Nations, development community, farmers, provincial agencies, lots of great feedback through some of the referrals and whatnot. So I feel like we have received a lot of great feedback, had a lot of great conversations over the past few years. And noting too that some of the more recent engagement that we have done that Alex will point on soon, we focused on some key topics in the last little while. And so those have been temporary buildings and structures, off-street parking in residential zones, keeping of animals, and private and group mortgage facilities or docks. So Alex is going to sort of jump into those a little bit more in a minute. Mike did mention this, but I want to reiterate again. The zoning bylaw is still in draft form, and we're still continuing to receive feedback on it. It is not yet considered by the board, so there is still time to make changes to that document, and staff are continuing to welcome that. I wanted to point out too that staff are also planning to meet in December and early January, again with members of the agriculture community, as well as the development community regarding proposed zoning, just getting another chance at some feedback and some discussions with them. And then we're also planning to continue discussions with First Nations. We've had lots of emails and communications back and forth. And so we'll meet with them to discuss the proposed zoning, as well as look ahead to the comprehensive OCP updates and having those long-term visioning conversations and how our the ACRD OCPs can sort of relate to the First Nations long-term planning goals as well. So I think I'll ask for if there's any questions at this point and then turn it over to Alex. Any questions from anyone? All right.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody. Please feel free to stop me with any questions as we move along. When Amy says I'll be going into the meat of things, she is not kidding. This is something that us planners can talk about until we go blue in the face. So if you want to break it up and you have any questions, I certainly encourage you to do so. So you've heard from Amy about the key changes that have been proposed to the zoning bylaw and the process that we have followed to date. And now we want to focus on the benefits of updating the zoning bylaw and what those updates will look like and what we believe will have a positive impact on the communities within the region. In many respects, as you heard from Amy, the draft updated zoning bylaw is now more permissive than the current 1973 bylaw. The overall intent of the project, as you heard, is to modernize and update the zoning bylaw in a manner that intends to limit the impact on property owners, becomes more flexible and relevant to the current realities and expectations that we have within the region, provides more certainty as well for property owners, for developers, and for the public as a whole, as well as the board in their decision-making process, and then also intends to better align with opportunities that are provided in provincial legislation. So with those values in mind, what I want to do now is really focus on some of these key topic areas that Amy's touched on, and hopefully we can have a discussion on some of them. And what I'll begin with is just highlight what the proposed updates look like in the zoning bylaw, and then what we believe that benefit and impact will have on the community. So housing, as Amy mentioned, this is a big deal in all communities, but particularly one of the most pressing topics in our communities. And we've had a lot of conversations with the public and the board as well. The current zoning bylaw. So we've proposed some updates that intend to remove barriers and to make housing approval a little bit more inclusive. And in doing so, the current zoning bylaw allows for an accessory dwelling unit, or what a secondary home. That's the term we use for secondary home. Is limited to 860 square feet in floor area, and it's permitted on a 1 acre minimum lot size in the Alberta Valley and in Banfield. In Long Beach, it is even more restrictive, where the ADU is limited to 750 square feet, and the minimum lot size is 2.5 acre minimum. So what we propose to do is to update the regulations to be consistent across the region and permit a larger floor plate of 90 square meters, which is about 970 square feet on a residential and rural property that has a 1 acre minimum lot size. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is that says the minimum dwelling sizes. So some of the residential zones that we have restricted minimum dwelling sizes, with 900 square feet being a minimum lot size in certain zones, or sorry, a minimum house size in certain zones. So we've proposed to remove all minimum dwelling sizes and rely on the building code requirements for that. And again, both of these changes will allow the regional district to be more flexible in housing approval and housing options available to the public, and intend to promote affordability in doing so. Home occupations, you heard that from Amy as well. So the zoning bylaw currently allows home occupations in the residential zone, but it limits them to within the single family dwelling. We have proposed to expand home occupations and permit them within accessory buildings and also within an ADU. And then building on that, we've also introduced home industry, which is a new regulation in the zoning bylaw. It's contemplated in each of our Alberta Valley OCPs at this point, and that would intend to allow for small scale home industry uses on properties with a 5 acre minimum lot size and subject to setbacks and screening requirements. So the intention here is to allow for smaller scale manufacturing, things like equipment parking, and minor repair and other live work types of mixed uses that need to be within the accessory building or outside, subject to increased setbacks. This is a use that we see a lot of in the rural areas, and including that within the zoning bylaw intends to be more inclusive. So that it really speaks to the need for more home-based business opportunities, which has certainly grown in the last number of years and exacerbated by the pandemic. Greater flexibility for working from home, and then startup industry opportunities for actually incubating businesses. Sorry, that would intend to move to commercial properties as they grow. Temporary dwelling in an RV. This is another thing that we've talked about lots with our communities. We currently allow temporary dwelling in an RV for 1 day in the residential zones and up to 30 days in the A zones. So we've proposed to increase this to 15 days in the residential zone, 60 days in the rural zone. The idea here is that it would intend to be more flexible in supporting short-term housing opportunities, short-term vacation opportunities for family and friends, and then the rural zones allowing for up to 6 days would open up seasonal worker accommodation opportunities as well. Does anyone have any questions about this up to this point?
I see Fred.
Please go ahead, Fred.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes.
So with RVs, is it still only one allowed in the rural and residential areas, or has that changed?
No, the intention would be to allow one RV per property to be used as a temporary dwelling. I mean, we'll get into the parking of RVs on properties and how that will allow up to 4 boats, trailers, and RVs on a lot. But the use of an RV as a temporary dwelling would be limited to.
Is there any accommodation for, say, family reunions where people are coming from Saskatchewan, come bring their RV out and then stay on your property because there's lots of room? Or is that basically shut down now?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the intention isn't to shut things like that down, right? That's the rationale behind expanding the use from the 1 day limit to up to 15 days in the residential zone and from 30 days in the R zone up to 60 is to allow more flexibility in that. But that doesn't mean that we are out there enforcing, one-off family reunions and weddings and opportunities like that have always happened in the regional district and have never become an issue. You go ahead, Mike.
And if I can, I just want to add a little bit around RVs. And Alex had already mentioned, like these things happen, and as you recall, our enforcement policies will respond to complaints. It's something that we've, as staff and myself, have talked with the board, the previous boards about RVs, and in the last couple of years through the pandemic, RVs have been used more and more for permanent dwellings, and there's differences between RVs and the types of RVs and who's using them, and I think it becomes important, and we need to take consideration. If as long as we have regulations, we have the ability to respond to complaints, and to make sure that we can control or have a say over safe living conditions. If we allow RVs on a broader scale, so allow campsites or RV living with a number of units on a property, that can quickly become something where, the old 1970s RV versus the 2023, $300,000 RV, we don't get to differentiate between those as local governments, and I'm using the all-inclusive ACRD, and we also want to be careful about the quality of people's housing and the quality of housing for people who don't have opportunities to or can't afford other places, and I really would encourage the board to, if they're specifically about housing, we have other tools to provide safe housing, and with that comes the proper inspections to make sure that there's a minimum code met, and that applies to both stick-built homes and mobile homes, because they need to meet a certain standard to be a mobile home, and it's just something I want to balance. So going back to Director Boyko's comment about, as staff, we're not recommending the board go out there and try and police people on family reunions if they park a number of RVs out there. But we also have to be conscious of if RVs are camping on a piece of property, for example, for a long period of time, there is health concerns around waste and sewage disposal and water, and those are something, again, past boards we've talked about, and having the ability to manage those, as opposed to a single family dwelling or any building for that matter that has washroom facilities, for example. They have to have septic, etc. Whereas we don't have that, we're not able to regulate that if it's an RV. So I think there's a whole bunch of factors that we have to consider as we look at these. So, and happy to entertain questions. I think these are all good discussions because it's tough, like around our community, and we certainly can see a lot of RVs that people are using. You can see the cords running to them, the slide outs are out, and we have a housing shortage.
Mike, I appreciate your comments, and I agree that it's something that needs to be addressed and looked in the future. I think the reality is in Beaufort and the other areas around there, when you drive around, I would hazard to say there's 200, 300, 400 RVs in use, and by housing their people right now, full time. Lots of them have built-in water and septic fields, and we all know that. And I think that's something that has to be considered moving forward. Thank you.
I was actually going to mention the same thing, looking in my area, that I know there's one place that has, I think, 3 newer style RVs on the property, but they also have septic connected to them. But my question actually was about time. When you're talking 15 days or 60 days, do you mean per year? And is that part of it?
Yeah, the intention is that would be a yearly limit, and that'd be a cumulative number of days. So an RV may be used for up to 15 days throughout the year, whether that's a 15-day stretch or a couple weekends a year or something like that. That's the intention. Please, yes.
I'm just also thinking out loud. 60 days, it might be too short. I don't know. It just seems like the ones that I see are usually they're 6 months.
No, that's important feedback, and we've received a lot of those, a lot of ideas that relate to that through the APCs as well. So that is something we can continue to have a discussion on what the proper balance is, as Mike was talking about. Any other questions?
So Alex, I just want to point out that this is not a creation of a temporary use permit or a rental unit for properties. And I'd also want to ask for these one-offs of like a family reunion or something where you have people come in. Is there any way we could do a permit for that?
So to answer your first question, thank you, Director Brilliant. That's a really good point. I think that's super pertinent to your area, but to all the areas that we have, is that the intention of the temporary accommodation in an RV is not a short-term rental unit. So it's not an Airbnb or a VRBO or something like that. It is for families, friends, and the owners of the property to use. In terms of a permitting process for a one-off event, we have a temporary use permit process, but I think that's something that as staff we wouldn't want to see people have to go through for a wedding or a one event that happens in the summer. If we can look at like a special event permitting process that has less administrative work behind it, that's something we could look at. I'm just not aware of any options that we have or any tools that we have that would allow for that. If it were a use where, if it was a venue where they wanted to host multiple weddings for different parties over a summer, then I think that would be an appropriate discussion to have through either a rezoning application or a temporary use permit application. But the one-off, family reunions, all the cousins get together, I don't see a way for us to deal with that in an effective way right now.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, I guess carry on.
Thank you very much. So I want to move into agriculture uses. So as many of you know, removing barriers to agriculture and supporting farming in the updated zoning bylaw has been a goal of ours, building upon the work that we've done with food security initiatives and with agriculture that we've worked extensively with our committees with, as you heard from Mike this morning, in the implementation of our agriculture plan over the past number of years. We have proposed to update the zoning bylaw to align with provincial policies for land in the ALR. This would allow for new opportunities that the current zoning bylaw does not contemplate, such as agritourism accommodation, which would allow for up to 10 sleeping units either within a dwelling or as individual campsites located on a farm property. We've also, in the latest draft, we've included vertical farming and container farming in the definition of agriculture uses that are permitted on lots. We've increased the allowable lot coverage for greenhouses specifically. We've permitted on-farm slaughter and small-scale meat processing within certain rural zones. All of these ideas are supported by newer provincial regulations that intend to open up the door for greater economic opportunities and new ideas in farming. So we're looking forward to aligning with that. The keeping of animals, we've revised. I see a question from Fred. Actually, would you like to ask that now?
I was going to wait to finish the page, if that's okay.
No worries. I'll keep going. Keeping of animals, we have revised the keeping of animals regulation to be much more permissive in allowing livestock, poultry, and beekeeping on non-ALR properties smaller than 5 acres. The number of animals permitted on a lot will continue to be based on lot size, as we will focus on in the upcoming slide I have for you. And all of the animal regulations will not apply on land within the ALR and will not apply to properties that are greater than 5 acres in lot size. the benefits to the region in our view would build upon what we're attempting to do with agriculture and food security by promoting more home-based and hobby farm-based food production, and whether that's for one family or for a smaller commercial use. And then the last thing I want to highlight on this slide for you is just the overall text and map format that as you've seen in Amy's introduction, we have revised the text format to be more user-friendly for the public. We've modernized wording that is more reflective of the current legislation and really current language. It intends to be more readable and easier to understand. That's an overarching goal that we've had as we work through this project. We've also revised the map format, and that's utilizing the new GIS database tools that our mapping technician Amy Wilson has been developing and working on. And as you heard from Mike this morning, that will include the new online web map that we are hoping to launch in the coming months, and will be linked on the website. So the overall benefit and impact on the community, the new formats intend to improve efficiency for staff in administering the bylaw, efficiency for the board and our committee members in understanding it. But more importantly, will be much more accessible, transparent, and open to the public. So the intention is to make these bylaws as accessible as we can to the public as they consider ideas that they might have for their property. I will pause now for your question, Brett, if you like.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I have a question with regard to the one sentence. Item 4, 3.18.7.4. with about outside enclosures for animals. It says, with the exception of meat birds without access to outside space. So as someone that's done a bunch of meat birds many times, I prefer to get, hybrid breeds as opposed to the ones you get at KFC or Costco or something like that can run around and have some access to outside space for the, 3 months they're alive. I think that restricting access to outside space is not really, for someone that's trying to go organic and healthy and get the best product that you can on your own property. I don't know if that's required to have that wording there.
So thank you for highlighting that, Brett. I think the intention of that line, and we're just looking at right now, though, is to not include meat birds that don't have access to the outside in the overall limit, the overall maximum limit that you're allowed to have. So it's not intending to say that birds can't have an inside-outside use. It's saying that if you are raising birds over the short term, which is something that we heard from our meetings with the agricultural community, that if you're doing that, you have to do it at a large enough scale to make it worthwhile. And there's a short cycle. I think it's an 8 week or 7 week cycle or something like that. If you're doing that and it's in a self-contained environment, then the maximum limits and the potential nuisances to the neighbors are much more mitigated. So we'll take another look at that to make sure that that's worded in a way that we're intending to have it worded. Does that meet what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think when we do it, and our neighbors and most of the people in Beaufort, they want to have their animals get some outside, free range, organic, all those kind of nice fancy words. And we're doing that for food security and take, inflationary pressures off the family. And instead of going to Costco and buying a 3-pack, we can grow 30 or 40 birds in a couple months. And they have a great life and they're very good. But having access to outside space and either in a tractor or a fenced area and somewhere that's contained, I think is a great thing. And pretty well everyone does it.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described there is exactly what we are intending to promote and intending to remove barriers where we can in the zoning bylaw to allow those things to happen more effectively. The poultry restrictions right now are probably some of the most restrictive keeping of animals wording we have in the current zoning bylaw. The current zoning bylaw is worded such that you need 2 acres to keep 1 chicken. So that, I mean, that's obviously not how the area has developed over the years, and that, you know, that's not something that we enforced. But we use that as an example of us, you know, blowing up this section in a way that you know, as we've worked through this, we've tried to find a balance that leans more on the scale of allowing things like home livestock and home poultry and home beekeeping at a greater scale, while still having minimum standards to mitigate issues with neighbors, whether that be with setbacks or with the setbacks from creeks and things like that. So, you know, what you just described there is what we're intending to do. So if we need to spend some more work on that section to get it right, we're happy to do so. Susan?
Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Alex.
In speaking about the animal keeping bylaws, and in particular chickens and roosters, in meetings in the past that I was at, I noticed a difference between how Sprout Lake would like to handle it and how Beaver Creek currently handles things, and there's quite a difference. And I'm thinking, is there a way to separate these things and allow both areas, you know, to have what they need in one bylaw? Like, I don't know how to do that. I'm just thinking Beaver Creek needs their own section.
Yeah, no, and I do appreciate the comment, because that's something we've heard a lot. So what we have some mapping available that we're going to get into in a bit here, and we'll screen share that for people on Zoom as well. That will show some of the differences we have between the areas, just in terms of where the rural zones are and where the residential zones are located. And then also what we've tried to do, I know that a lot of the concerns that we heard from Sprout Lake, for example, was impact on the water quality. So what we've done is we've ensured that we have an appropriate setback in there from water courses, whether that be a creek or a lake or something like that will deal with things like manure management and more intensive agricultural uses that you know have to be fenced away from water courses. So I think that there's a way to, between those, you know, those conditions of use that we can apply, that will deal with the issues that we see, you know, individually or across the region. And then also looking at things by lot size and by the rural and residential zones. I think we have an opportunity to tailor this to multiple areas.
And I just wanted to just add sort of, because I think it's important to note. So, you know, the other side is we periodically or often get complaints related to animals, and they're really, I think they're across all of the areas. Probably the least amount from Beaufort, because they have just generally larger property sizes, so that and that's reflected in there. But they really relate to property sizes, and both total area, but also distance from the neighbors. And you know, we see the complaints in Beaver Creek, across Beaver Creek, Sprout Lake, Cherry Creek, within the Alberni Valley. You know, they're fairly consistent related to the property size. So it's just, you know, we can work to manage whatever we need to manage. I'm not saying that. I just wanted to just highlight that we, you know, the things that we've talked about with regard to Sprout Lake, they apply in other areas as well. So, but we've got some good maps we want to highlight.
I see questions from Penny and Bob.
Bob can go.
Thank you. Great question with respect to the bylaws and varying the bylaws. And the reason I raise this as well is I am all for moving this work forward. It's been a long time coming. There are issues that are by not moving our bylaws forward and making the zoning changes, we make it difficult for staff to address new applications, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, and I'm hoping Mike or Alex or Amy can speak to this, is again coming back to the ability to customize the zoning to some degree. And you know, I'm using the burning, the burning in Bamfield, and our needs are different. We don't have the bowl effect with respect to smoke and moorage, as an example. Docks and moorage. It's illegal to have a homeowner rent out a portion of his dock, but in reality, everyone's doing it. So, can we address that, electoral area by electoral area? So, anyway, that's my comments on the ability to let's move this forward. We need to make the changes, but can we come back in time and address these things? Thank you.
So I think to go to, can we tailor the zoning, to apply in Beaufort, Beaver Creek, Spur Lake, Banfield differently? Yes, and this bylaw sort of contemplates that in Banfield already, but with residential lot sizes and the ability to connect to a potential sewer system in Banfield, so you can have smaller lot sizes there. So we have those examples, and yes, we can do those things. And I'm going to let Alex later in the presentation, so we're talking about the docks and some changes that are proposed, because I think some of what Director Beckett is mentioned, hopefully is addressed, but we'll let you review our kick at the can. The other thing was, can things be changed? And yes. So if we go forward and adopt the bylaw and the roosters and chickens aren't working, we can change it, right? Like that's an ability to change it. And with this type of project, I expect there will be changes that will just be initiated because we're going to identify something that needs to be changed. So it's adopted and done, never going to be reviewed again. And I just, as we've talked through a lot of these things, like, do go back and look, I want to keep in mind the regulations that don't make sense. So right now, chickens aren't permitted on a 1.9 acre property, but people have them. And I mean, it's unless they're like a really severe nuisance, we wouldn't even want to be bringing anything like that to the board. And we just want to, we don't want to be regulating by ignoring. We want to just put some regulations in place that make sense for the community, so that everybody's on a fair and level playing field.
So I just like to advise that this is a living document, so it can be changed, and it has been changed many times, but it has that ability. So and just that we've been working on this for a couple of years now, and that the ACRD has committees such as the APCs, the agricultural advisory and development committees, and also community consultation. So there's been a lot of work on this already. We're coming to the final ends of it all. There's a lot of information available. If you have any questions on any one of these, there's a lot of background behind it. So I think that staff have done a great job bringing it to the point that we're at, and look forward to us talking about the docks. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the comments, Penny. We always love talking about docks as well, just so you know. Okay, so at this point, if there's no other questions right now, I think I'm going to move.
Just wondered if Bob Beckett. No, okay, thank you.
Move into a bit of a deeper dive into some examples of current and proposed regulations for these main topics to show specifically what we've included in the October 2022 draft. And I'm going to do that right now. So the off-street parking in residential zones. This is something that we heard lots about. We had lots of feedback from some of the APCs on it. The current regulations are very restrictive in our view and not reflective of the current uses on many properties throughout the region. You'll see in the on the left-hand column there, the current zoning bylaw, section 6.16. It limits the parking of parking on private residential properties to one boat, one trailer, and one RV. So recognizing that that's not reflective of what a lot of people have on their residentially zoned properties, we have proposed changes to allow for a combined maximum of up to 4 boats, trailers, and RVs. But one important thing that I want to highlight here that was lost in the discussion a little bit when we went through this with the public and with APC meetings is that these regulations only apply to the residential zone lands currently, and they're only proposed to apply to the residential zone lands in the updated zoning bylaw. So they do not apply to the rural zoned properties, which are those that generally fit the character of a 2-acre minimum lot size or larger. The intent on the rural properties is to not introduce any restrictions or any new regulations, and to simply rely on enforcement of commercial uses if that becomes a problem with storage of vehicles that extends beyond a personal use. So we're not intending to create a problem on the rural use properties where one doesn't already exist. So at this point, I think I'd like to draw your attention to the maps that we've done, because we've prepared a few to give a better visual representation of which properties would be affected by this regulation. And Amy is working on screen sharing that as well. But as we talked about, and maybe I'll wait for Amy. Okay. All right, it's up. Okay, perfect. So when we look at this, the properties shown in yellow are the rural zoned properties within the Alberni Valley. We do have maps for Banfield and Long Beach as well that we can make available. We'll email out, and we have hard copies here, but just for the purposes of the screen sharing, we'll focus on the Alberni Valley for now. But the yellow properties are the rural zone properties, and the pink properties are the residential zone properties. So as we look at this, when we talk about off-street parking regulations, both trailers and RVs, they would not apply to the properties in yellow. We're not proposing to introduce any additional parking regulation on those lands, and they account for about 2,500 parcels in the regional district as a whole. On the residential zone lands in pink, that you can see on the map here, numbering about 2,000 parcels throughout the region, we are proposing to allow greater flexibility in the parking of boats, trailers, and RVs by being more permissive than the current zoning and allowing for a combination of up to 4. And so we thought we would, as we attempt to be more effective in our communication and how we visualize what these rules will mean in the region, we're going to be producing more of these maps that will help give you an idea, and you can start to see the differences a little bit there with the pink zones all around Sprout Lake being residential, and a lot of the rural areas or the less developed areas within Cherry Creek, Beaver Creek, and Beaufort are yellow. And here is an example of the Banfield map as well. So there is a lot of properties there that these rules will not even apply to, and we currently don't have any regulations on them. Fred, I see a question for you.
I think these maps are an awesome idea. And when the next set of public hearing comes up, you can just say, hey, none of these rules are applied to all the rural areas in yellow. People can say, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it. Or I live where there's a whole bunch of pink stuff. And yeah, I'm not going to be worried about all the chickens my neighbors have because they're going to have regulations. So I think these maps are a great idea.
Thank you, Fred. Yeah, no, that's an awesome idea to have them available at the public hearing. Does anybody have any questions about off-street parking regulations at all, or comments? All right, we're going to get back into temporary buildings and structures, and then we'll cycle back to the map when we talk about RVs. But temporary buildings and structures right now, we allow them for construction purposes while a lot is being developed, or for up to 6 months with a building permit. And what the current zoning contemplates for temporary buildings are things like boat shelters, car shelters, tent structures, and other portable structures that are placed on the property. In the new zoning bylaw, we have proposed to clarify the use and placement of temporary buildings, and have included shipping containers where we reference temporary buildings and structures. And again, this is another topic that has solicited a lot of feedback from area residents and from the APCs when we had the discussion. In the October 2022 draft, we've made a lot of changes. We've now clarified that there would be no time limit restriction for the placement of these structures and no maximum number of temporary building or shipping containers on a property. But instead, they would be regulated in much the same way that an accessory building would be, by meeting the minimum setbacks from the lot lines, by meeting the maximum height restrictions and maximum lot coverage as well. In this draft, we've also removed any reference to building permits in the zoning bylaw for temporary buildings and shipping containers. That was some wording that we had placed in there before. Building permitting is essentially regulated by the building bylaw and by the building inspectors themselves, and would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis depending on the use of the structure. The expectation is that a temporary building or a shipping container that is placed on the property and that is used for personal storage, equipment storage, things like that would not require a building permit. And that's something we've been clear with our meetings with the APCs. Now the exceptions to that is if those shipping containers are altered or modified to be used for human occupation, for example, that would require a building permit to make sure it meets the minimum standards and is connected to services and all of that. Any questions on this section? Mike?
I just wanted to add one thing around buildings as it related to agriculture, and it doesn't have anything to do with the zoning bylaw, but it did come up as part of the review. So the building bylaw was updated probably 2 years ago now, and low occupancy farm buildings on properties with farm status do not require building permits. So if somebody's has farm status, a farmer has farm status on his property and he needs to put up a hay barn, it's a low occupancy building. He needs to build it to the National Building Code, but he does not need to come in and apply for a building permit through the regional district as long as it's under a certain size. And it's a fairly large size. It's about 500 square meters, but I don't quote me on that one. I'm just trying to go from memory. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. That's something that has come up in some of the feedback.
Okay, any other questions on temporary buildings?
So I just want to comment too, even though there's no building permit, they're still governed by the setbacks on a property, as I recall.
Yes, that is correct. And if they were going to build it in, say, a development permit area, the development permit would still apply.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. The next main topic I'd like to highlight, we've talked about it lots here already, but temporary dwelling in an RV. As you've heard in the updated zoning bylaw, we've proposed to extend it from 1 day to 15 days in the residential zones and from 30 days to 60 days in the rural zones. Some of the conditions of use that we've talked about that I just wanted to highlight is there in the wording of the October draft is that there would be a limit of 1 per property at a time. There must be a house on the property, so it would not be permitted on a vacant lot at this time. Proper sewage containment must be in place, and then the 15-foot side yard setbacks we have in most of the residential and rural zones would need to be maintained. And again, the intention is to not allow these as short-term vacation rentals or Airbnbs. So if we go back to the map again, I will highlight what this looks like. So just as a reminder again, the rural areas are yellow, the pink areas are residential. So that shows you where the shorter term and the longer term opportunities for temporary accommodation are located. And once again, what really jumps out to me is the Sprout Lake area, where that's where we have we've had the complaints in the past about them being used as rentals, and that's not the intention here. And then the rural areas in the rest of the Alberni Valley, we typically don't get a lot of complaints about those units on larger properties. They're screened properly, and they have the containment that they are expected to have. We have less issues there, but either way, we are looking to make that zoning a little bit more permissive than what's currently allowed. Any more comments on temporary dwellings, Penny?
Just about Great Central. It looks like it's all not residential properties. So there's an issue around RVs there. Just to
Yeah, so
highlight.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the Little Germany area, which is the old school local name here, is of Central Lake Road. You know, there are larger, you know, hobby farm properties and rural properties there. They are rural, so the current zoning would allow for an RV to be placed there for up to 30 days. You know, where we've had issues and with properties that go beyond that, you know, that's a bylaw enforcement matter. What this amendment would intend to do would to make that a little bit more flexible to allow for up to 60 days, but would not allow for year-round occupancy for one or multiple RV units. So any you know, site-specific issues we have would be dealt with through the enforcement process. Thank you, Ben. All right. Get back to the presentation here. Good, thank you. Agriculture use. Just make sure you don't have any other questions here, but the agriculture uses in the current zoning bylaw, we don't have a lot of information in there. There's no definition included for agriculture uses, and specific farming uses are specified in each of the zones. So we put a lot of work into this in the new zoning bylaw, as I've outlined before, but then also specifically in the October draft as well. So the idea here is to allow flexibility to remove barriers where we can, and you know, that's the values that we've been living by as we look at agriculture use. Some of the updates in the October draft, we've included farm processing, storage, and sale of farm products, as well as the use and repair of farm machinery in the agriculture use definition. That wasn't clear before, but the expectation is that if you harvest vegetables from your property, for example, you are able to process them on the lot, and then expanding beyond that, the meat processing as well. So if you have a farm gate abattoir license, which is a small scale license from the province, then you are allowed to do some minor farm processing of your products there as well. We've added controlled environment structure definition, and that intends to permit farming in a way that minimizes the use of land. So we have one of these units I'm aware of in the Alberni Valley, but they're essentially self-contained shipping containers that are intensive growing, you know, grains and herbs and things like that. So that is a policy change that the province made in early, I think it was February 2022, earlier this year, and they've included that as a permitted use within the ALR. So we intend to align with that in the zoning bylaw. Lot coverage for greenhouses, we mentioned that before. So we've included a specific lot coverage for greenhouses in the rural areas of up to 50% and residential zones of up to 20% with a 1 acre minimum lot size. And again, the intention there is to allow for more greenhouse uses, recognizing that there is a scale there that needs to be achieved to make that profitable and successful. So we are intending to allow for that. The agritourism and the agritourism accommodation, something I mentioned before, but that would allow for up to 10 sleeping units per farm. And that could be a sleeping unit, could be a bedroom within a home, or it could be a campsite as well. And that's an opportunity that the Agricultural Land Commission introduced in the last couple of years for farms that are operating with farm status and meeting a number of conditions. We don't have that ability in the current zoning bylaw, so we are intending to include that as an opportunity moving forward with the new zoning bylaw, and that would be, you know, the use itself would be in compliance with the zoning. There would be no permits you'd be applying for or anything like that to build a smaller seasonal campground that would support an agritourism use. So we're excited about that. And then again, the farm gate abattoir rules as well that allow for up to 25 animal units on a farm to be raised and then slaughtered and processed on site. We've included that as a permitted use in some of the rural zones as well, so that if a farmer wants to do that and they get the license from the province, they won't be making any applications to us other than potentially a building permit. So now I think, oh yes, Susan, please.
I was just looking at the map and I'm wondering, in the legend, if, you know, in the yellow, is that the wrong regulation? It says parcel with proposed rural zoning. And then the second one is regulation 3.1, 3.72 would apply. Should it be 1?
Are you looking at the RV map? Is that?
Yeah, I just thought I probably should say something.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah, we have Amy just confirming that right now for us. If there's a mistake in there.
Well,
then,
yeah, might as well correct it.
yeah,
If it is.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You are right. Good catch.
Okay, good.
The map, that's just a typo.
Okay,
Mary.
good.
So it references in the next to the yellow and the pink 3.13.7.2 twice. So one should say 1 and one says 2. We'll fix that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly highlight another map that we've prepared here, which shows the ALR boundaries or the ALR lands that we have within the Alberni Valley. This really demonstrates the impact, I think, that the ALR has on our region. There's just over 7,700 hectares of land within the ALR, and all of this land is impacted by the Agricultural Land Commission regulations as well as our zoning, so that the provincial regulations that are in place limit what the ability we have to regulate within our own local bylaws. And on ALR lands, the zoning bylaw must fit within the framework that's provided by the Land Commission. So we have worked to both align those regulations to comply with what the province is requiring of us. But as you heard, we've also worked to align those regulations to take advantage of those new opportunities that we didn't have before. So I think that's an important thing to highlight, that we don't have complete land use control over all of those more rural areas within the Alberni Valley that are within the ALR. Are there any questions on agriculture at all? Okay, I want to, the next topic is keeping of animals, which really blends well together anyway. So I want to highlight this, which is a section of the updated zoning bylaw, as you've heard, that we've spent a lot of time refining after much discussion with the public, the APCs, and then also meeting with our agricultural committees as well. So the current zoning bylaw regulations, as you've heard, the keeping of poultry or livestock up on a horse is not permitted on a lot smaller than 2 acres. So there's a big gap on what you can do on a lot between 0 and 2 acres that we intended to fill. There are no temporary increases for breeding or for stock replacement, for example. There's no manure regulations in there, and then we have some animal structure setbacks that can be prohibitive. The 80-foot setback from lot lines that you see in that column there actually relate to poultry. So the chicken coop right now has to be 80 feet from a side lot line, which has become problematic over the years. So with the new zoning bylaw, the changes that we made in October, additional animal types were included, and increased animal limits based on lot size. So if we do have tracked changes versions of the zoning bylaw available here in the room, and then we'll make them. They're actually available on the ZB review website as well. But in that, you can see what we did. We increased the number of livestock based on lot size by 1, and we increased the number of poultry permitted on those lots that are between 2 and 5 acres. And another thing that we included in there is temporary increases for breeding and for stock replacement. That is something that we heard from the farmers that was missing. You know, when we talk about allowing 24 hens and ducks. If you are breeding them, there will be a time over a temporary period where you'll have more than that. And the expectation is that if it's just temporary time period, we left it vague in the zoning bylaw on purpose to allow for that. And then stock replacement as well. So if you have laying hens, they reach a useful end of their egg laying life, and there's need to replace them, and there's often a transition period. So we intended to word the zoning bylaw to be reflective of that. Manure regulations as well is something that we've fit within the guidelines that the Ministry of Agriculture has produced about storing manure next to water courses, for example. So we've introduced setbacks from that, and as you can see, setbacks from minor streams and major streams as well. And then just to highlight again, I know we mentioned it before, but these keeping of animals regulations would not apply to any of the land within the ALR that we just showed on the last map, and would not apply to any of the parcels that are 5 acres or larger. And I think that's a really important aspect here, because that, when we talk to farmers, they're often worried about, are you going to come in and say, you're allowed X number of livestock and Y number of chickens? That's not the intention of this. This is more residential and rural focused properties, and not those larger agricultural ones. I'm going to quickly jump into the next slide, because we have another visual that Amy has prepared for us that helps explain the keeping of animals regulation as well. And I think when we talk about effective communication, we've made maps that help explain what we're proposing. We're going to do more of this as well, where we have charts and pictures and visual representations that really help make that argument. So what we've intended here is a 1 to 2 acre lot, not within the ALR. This is just an example lot used as a case study showing the impact of the new, more permissive regulations that we proposed. So this lot, right now, you're allowed 4 domestic pets, so 4 dogs, 4 cats, some combination thereof. We allow for horses specifically, but we have no reference to other livestock. There'd be no poultry permitted on this lot that's smaller than 2 acres, and bees are not permitted in residential zones currently as well. So that's another gap that we've discovered. So through extensive discussions, I would say, with both this committee and the board and our APCs and the Ag Committee, we've refined these numbers. So domestic pets, you can see there's more there. Livestock, we've allowed for a maximum of 2. And then on the lots between 2 and 5 acres, we've allowed for up to 4. And we should have a note in there that half an acre of land is required to be dedicated for each livestock. That is wording that we have in the current zoning, and the intention there is that livestock have an appropriate amount of field space to roam and to feed. And as Director Boyko said, that's what people want to do out there. So that's something that we want to still allow. We would be allowing 24 hens and ducks versus what currently is 0. We also have a note in there about the roosters. We've had a lot of discussions about the roosters. I know Director Beckett is a fan of that, but where we've landed on this is roosters would be permitted on lots that are 0.8 of a hectare, which is 2 acres or larger. And then beyond that, between 2 and 5 acres, we were just looking at it recently, and I think we need to work on that, on the numbers, because after 5 acres, you'd be allowed an unlimited amount. Essentially, these rules would not apply. So 1 rooster, you need a 2 acre minimum lot size as of right now. Beehives, we have a number applied to beehives there. 6 is where we landed on this one. That hasn't been an issue. There hasn't been much discussion about limiting the number of beehives or anything like that. And we are aware of many people who keep bees in the rural areas, and it hasn't been an issue, but it's not currently contemplated in the residential zones. And then commercial kennels, that is something that we discuss periodically with people. We currently require a 5-acre minimum for a commercial kennel. That would remain in the new zoning bylaw as well. As that, there's a lot of nuisance issues that can come with barking dogs at a kennel. So we want to be clear that the expectation is that that would be a 5-acre minimum. And then you can see the little baby animals on the right would be the temporary increases for breeding and stock replacement. So hopefully that helps paint the picture a little bit. Any questions? I see Penny and Brett.
So I just want to point out that there still is setbacks you'll be able to see on the map, I'm sure, for all of this, so that 24 hens or ducks, I don't know how that would work on a water front. And raising livestock, however, on the waterfront is always problematic with water quality. So I'm wondering if you have a map available to be able to show.
We have a map that helps show where the keeping of animals regulations will apply, but I will highlight that we did include some setbacks in there for poultry pens, livestock pens, and for buildings that contain those uses, and going along with the building setbacks that we proposed in the zoning bylaw that we currently have in the OCP. They would be 15 meters from a minor stream and 30 meters from a major stream as well. So that is something that we've put some work into, recognizing that the protection of water quality is paramount. And we also have development permit areas as well. So if you are keeping animals that and you're needing to construct a building, we do have that 15-meter development permit area from minor streams, and then 30 meters from major streams as well. If you're a farm, so if you're over the 5-acre minimum, you're located in the AOR and you're an operating farm, there are some exemptions in the development permit areas for that, but those don't intend to extend to the residential properties.
So I have a question too about the minimum lot size. So does that exclude the housing footprint? So if you have to have a 5-acre minimum and you have 5 acres, but there's also a house and you want to have so many horses or something, does that exclude the house?
It does not. It would be the minimum lot size of the parcel as a whole. So there is no like home site that would be subtracted from this.
So I could have a house and a garage and my 4 vehicles and greenhouse and everything else, and then because it's still a 5-acre lot, having all of these animals, that it seems a bit, and some parcels are dissected by roads, so it's split property. Doesn't seem that clear to me when you're not excluding anything. Thank you.
Appreciate that. We do have setbacks from lot lines as well, right? And that intends to mitigate some of those potential neighbor nuisance issues where we have minimum, rear side and front yard setbacks for a lot of those uses, buildings for sure, but a lot of the animal uses as well.
And I just want to highlight too, and Amy or Alex can jump in and sort of talk about the details. But if a property is 5 acres right now, there's very little restriction on the keeping of animals, right? So under the current zoning, so what we've been talking about is the smaller lots, and there is obviously you can see from the changes it'll be more permissive under the proposed new zoning regulation, but right now, if you have 5 acres or 2 hectares, you are allowed. The keeping of animals allows pretty much the whole gamut of what's permitted. So that part isn't changing. We're not being more permissive on a 5-acre parcel. So hopefully that helps clarify.
I'm just remembering a property that came up, this issue came up at Sprout Lake, where there was a request, an application to put in a barn for 2 horses. And the piece of property that we're talking about is 5 acres, but it's dissected by the road that goes through it. And the horses were going to be kept on like a half an acre. And the whole rest of the property was very well manicured. And I don't think there was any intention of letting the horses roam around on that part of the property. So it wasn't approved, but I'm just concerned. It just makes me think about what other circumstances could be around that. Anyways, thanks.
Yeah, if I can, but you know, the setbacks and for buildings and the setbacks for pens would still apply, right? So I think, you know, a circumstance you're describing like that, like the setbacks, a variance would still be required, and you know, that instance, the variance is a discretionary decision of the board, so the board can choose to issue or choose not to issue a variance. So they have to have the property size, but they also have to be able to meet the setback requirements from water and property lines that are established in the zoning bylaw. Correct? Am I sort of summarizing that correctly, Alex? Okay, thanks.
No, absolutely. And thank you for the discussion on that. I think that is helpful, and you know, that's where we, you know, that's why we will utilize a tool like setback, because that helps deal with these more irregular properties and unique properties where you know, we do need to restrict those uses or where those uses are located within property, I guess. Fred, I'll go to your question.
This graphic is awesome. I would like to see the similar thing done for something less than 1 acre, something 2 to 5 acre, something 5 not in the ALR, 5 in the ALR, just to get every gamut and make it just crazy obvious, because this lays it out very well.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback, and that's work that we intend to do, and we will be doing. And we have one more map to show you too, because I know you seem like a map guy. So this map here shows if I can read it here. So the yellow parcels again are the rural parcels. The pink parcels are the residential parcels. What we've done with the gray is we've excluded all the lands within the ALR and excluded all the 5 acre lots. So the keeping of animals regulations do not apply to the land in the gray. They only apply to the yellow and the pink. And then if we look at the numbers of lots that applies to, you know, that's this requires some quick math in my head, but about 3,500 lots within the entire regional district that are less than 2 hectares and outside of the ALR that this would apply to. And then we have similar maps compared for Banfield and for the Long Beach area as well. And again, this is all intending to communicate more effectively with the public and to paint a better picture of where these regulations are permitted. So thank you for that. Any final questions on animals or agriculture? All right, last but not least, docks. I want to talk about docks because it's my favorite topic. As part of the zoning bylaw, we have introduced proposed regulations for private moorage facilities or docks that were based initially upon the dock regulations provided by the province for general permission for private docks on Crown land, and have been revised significantly from input received from the APCs, from the public, and from the board. The proposed zoning introduces limits on dock extent and width, the number of docks and berths, setbacks between docks and from other dock uses, and development permit requirements as well. So in many aspects now, the current draft that we have, the October 2022 draft, is now less restrictive than the provincial general regulations, as you will see. So the current zoning bylaw is mostly silent on docks. In the left-hand column of the table here, we don't have many regulations. There are DPA guidelines in Banfield that relate to docks, and there is a maximum width of the float, which is about 16 feet right now. What we have done is the current proposal, I'll just quickly detail it for you in the October 2022 draft. Within freshwater, so within lakes, maximum extent would be 42 meters. Within marine waters, so typically the Banfield Inlet and the Euclid Inlet in our areas, the maximum extent would be 60 meters. Maximum width of an access ramp, 6.5 feet or 2 meters. Maximum width of dock would be 16 feet or just under 5 meters. And then we would allow for one roof structure permitted on the dock as well, with a maximum footprint of 250 square feet. You'll see, I don't know if you can see the little asterisks on 3 of those regulations here. So dock width and roof structure and the access ramp are not permitted by the province currently for docks on Crown land, and an application, the province may require an application for a specific permission in those cases. But what we have heard is that the provincial regulations as they're drafted do not fit the needs of the community we have here, and they very much are more restrictive in the intent that they're large enough to moor a boat. They don't really contemplate things like group moorage uses and uses that are exposed and exposed to rising tides and heavy storms as well. But we don't see in our area, and they're also not reflective of the site-specific needs. There are areas of Sprout Lake that are quite shallow, so people need to build the docks out further, and we need to recognize that, I think. I just want to quickly highlight commercial docks as well. So for commercial, industrial, and institutional docks, we've also updated the proposed regulations in the commercial W4 and industrial W5 zones to be more permissive, recognizing that these docks are often associated with a 10-year management plan required by their licenses of occupation that they have from the Crown. So we don't really want to be getting in the way of that and adding additional regulations that would either be duplicated or would be on top of what the Crown requires. The OCP amendment bylaws that are being considered by the board introduce guidelines and updated development permit area requirements for the construction of docks, focusing on the protection of the environment and mitigating negative impacts of new moorage facilities. The Banfield OCP amendment bylaw, which was just adopted last week, refined the DP requirements for dock construction, building upon the development permit guidelines that were already in place along the foreshore in that area. And then the Sprout Lake OCP amendment bylaw that we will be considering at the public hearing this coming Monday. Actually, will introduce development permit requirements within the foreshore of Sprout Lake, and again focusing on construction guidelines that intend to minimize the impact on the natural environment and to protect the water quality of the lake, which is how we began this whole dock regulation process. Does anybody have any questions about docks, or like to make any comments?
I'm just curious, are there any in Beaver Creek?
Docks?
Yeah.
I think potentially there's some areas of Beaver Creek that are along the Sumas River.
Okay.
And so there are some docks. They don't stick out a long ways because the river flows. There are docks up against the shore in Beaver Creek.
Just to highlight too, because I know we had a question from Director Beckett about group merge facilities. So we have added some wording in there. I'm just reading it right now that private or group merge facilities shall be used for private residential and group residential merge only and must not be used for commercial uses, excluding the shared costs for dock maintenance or improvement purposes. And that's something that we talk about extensively with the Banfield APC that often what will happen is that there will be one person who owns the dock, and then they lease spaces to people for a nominal fee just to help with ongoing dock maintenance. And that is a necessity in that community. There's a critical lack of moored facilities, specifically on the west side, which is water access only. So we've intended to include that as an attempt to not introduce a barrier, I guess what I'm trying to say. So we don't want to get in the way of people continuing to use group merge facilities in Banfield or elsewhere for that matter. Penny?
Thank you. So would that be intended for Sprout Lake as well? That's just one question. I don't really see anything for marinas. We're getting more and more properties with multi ownership. So the dock is basically a little marina with 4 or more property owners now. Seems to be the way of the future with the cost of land. And there's nothing really talking about buoys as far as moorage and the leased space. So I'm just wondering how that would work on Sprout Lake. Thanks.
Thank you, Penny. All good points. The group moorage and the shared dock maintenance spaces, those intend to be for residential uses. So if that's, if there's a water access only property, there's a number of islands in Sprout Lake, and there's some water access only lots on the Two Rivers Arm side. They if an owner owned a dock and then allowed their neighbor to park there and took a fee for shared dock maintenance, it would fit within that section that I just read out. Where that differs from a marina is that it intends not to be a commercial use, where me who lives here in the Alberni Valley, I can't rent a space from them and pay them a fee to keep my boat out there and go use it on the weekends. That is a commercial marina use, and we have 2 zones in the lake where that is permitted. So that's not something that we want to open up and allow for more. I know there are issues that we've had a number of complaints about private commercial marinas developed over the years, and often they'll be moored at the end of road right of ways, for example, that are intended to be for public uses. So that is an enforcement issue that we'll continue to work with the province on, but the intention is to not allow for new commercial marina spaces at the lake without undergoing a comprehensive rezoning process or something like that would allow for a community conversation on it. Does that help answer your question?
Just a little bit. There's more about buoys.
Yeah, I was going to answer that one. So the buoys would fall under the federal regulations with shipping, and I'm not disagreeing that it's something that we would like to regulate, but I don't the research I've done so far, it's not something that falls within our authority to regulate. So it's one of those ones where we would want to continue working with the federal government to deal with that. So we don't have any there's nothing in the zoning bylaw that talks about buoys, just recognizing that's an area that we don't have the ability to regulate.
That is one of the problems that seems to be occurring. Started now on Sprout Lake, and I'm sure that it's happening out at Banfield. Different freshwater and marine water, different, but I think that we're going to have to address that however we can in the near future. Along with the road right of way, the accesses where these small marinas are starting to pop up with non-landowner waterfront owner properties. That's Ministry of Transportation issue, as far as I know, but a lot of people are complaining because they're not taxed, and wondering who the liability issue falls to if an accident happens at one of these points. Yeah, so there's still a lot to be identified and cleared up.
And certainly, I think those are all valid and real, and we're aware of them. They just, those ones fall outside the scope of the zoning bylaw. They are things that are happening in other jurisdictions, and you know, both the use of roadways for private marinas and the buoys. You know, I know in Ganges Harbor, there's a couple of hundred boats that just are moored to buoys, or there's anchor buoys out there, and they just tie up, and it has, you know, big impact. And I think those are the things where you know, collectively local governments should continue to lobby both the province and the federal government.
There was that, I've mentioned this already too. There's a dock on Lakeshore at a new house that's very large. And the neighbor is saying that the province has given permission for this, and saying that the size of the dock referred to the amount of waterfront they had. So I just wondered, I had asked if staff could investigate that, and I just wondering if there's been any progress on finding out what that was all about. Thanks.
So we can certainly ask the province what their criteria is for approving things, but that is, that highlights one of the challenges we have as staff, in that we don't have any zoning regulations or any development permit regulations, so we have no say in the size of the dock right now. And when we get complaints like that, we have to forward them on to the province and let the province deal with that. Sprout Lake is unique in that the east side of the lake is actually on the lake bed is owned by Mosaic, as it's east of the inland land grant line, which makes it such that the province has no authority within that area too. So the proposed regulations for docks within the zoning bylaw would intend to be consistent throughout the lake and throughout all of our waterfront areas, and then that gives us a tool to go and you know, see what happened there, and ask the owner, you know, what's the extent and what's the width, and are you meeting the zoning guidelines we have, and have you applied for a development permit? You know, that allows us the ability to do that, I guess.
I just it's come to my attention that this is a very large dock, and the neighbors are saying that they have permission from the province to do this. So if the province is coming forward with new regulations that don't align with ours, I'm just thinking that we're creating a problem for ourselves. But I'd like more information. Unfortunately, our public hearing is going to be on Monday, and I haven't had an answer from that. So
we'd be happy to follow up on that.
Thank you.
Again, yeah, that's no problem. We do have a contact with the ministry that has provided a letter detailing their support for our ongoing dock regulations, but we can certainly follow up with them again to see if any changes are planned.
Is this the dock on Taylor Arm or Lakeshore Road?
Dock is on Lakeshore Road, right at the end of Tilley Road. The new rock house.
Thank you, Director Cote. Any final comments on the dock regulations? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to pass back to Amy, who's going to wrap us up with the adoption process, or the anticipated adoption process, if the board chooses to do so, and then the steps moving forward, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end if anybody has any final ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. That was a lot of Alex, so I feel like this is a good time for me to start to wrap things up. And we are well aware of the time. So just 2 more quick slides. So this graphic here shows sort of the timeline for how to get the zoning bylaw, past the finish line and through the adoption process. So the first box there on the left, we're still receiving some input from public, First Nations, agencies, etc. on the October 2022 draft. As we keep mentioning, it's still a draft, so we're still welcoming feedback. Then the next step in that is making any additional updates to the draft and bringing it before the board for consideration for first reading, and that is anticipated for early 2023. At the same time that is happening, we are also working on the OCP amendment bylaws, which we've mentioned a number of times, and Alex has already mentioned. So Banfield OCP amendment bylaw was adopted November 9th. Sprout Lake public hearing for the OCP amendment bylaw is next Monday evening at 7 p.m. And then the additional 4 electoral area public hearings are anticipated to be set up early in 2023 as well. So lots of stuff happening or anticipated to be happening in the early new year. Once the zoning bylaw is received first reading by the board, then we'll do an official agency and First Nation referral. And this is definitely not the first time the agency and the First Nations will have seen this. We did a pre-referral way back in 2020, received a whole bunch of feedback, made updates. They've also received the information again in a referral with OCP amendments. So lots of great comments and feedback that has all been discussed and incorporated into each draft that we've put out. As well, then of course we'll be having a public hearing and then hopefully consideration for second and third readings, and then finally adoption. So again, the timeline is just to start that hopefully in early 2023. And the last slide we have touched on this a number of times throughout our presentation today, and staff are very appreciative already of the feedback, not only today, as well as Director Beckett has made lots of comments around, provide an example. He says, when I meet someone sort of on the Banfield boardwalk and they say to me, what's the current and what's proposed, give it to me in simple terms, what does that look like? So that is part of what we want to work on with the communication plan, using those little animal icons, different property examples of, what the new setbacks would look like if they change or that sort of thing. So we'll put lots of thought into that. As was also mentioned, we now have a communications coordinator position, so we can, don't have to do those things on the side of our desk and work with Heather to develop an actual communications plan. We're on social media more. We're finally on Facebook. It'll be easier to get the word out about these regulations, especially once they're adopted and beyond that. There's going to be some people may still not have heard of it. I hope that everyone's heard of this project, but some people may have not. And usually it just comes up when they come to the counter, every time someone comes in as a acquirer, we let them know about the current and say, hey, are you aware that the zoning is being updated or in draft form? And we provide both examples for them. So again, working on that, just creating that additional community awareness and that sort of thing, educating the public, really going to put a lot of effort into that. And that'll sort of, lead into when we do the comprehensive OCP updates as well, continuing the conversation sort of, they're very much interrelated, zoning and OCP. So working on that, as well as we keep saying over and over again, we continuously welcome feedback. We very much appreciate when we get emails that, may have may have a recommendation for what they think should be changed, and how this would be better benefit. So staff really appreciate, detailed feedbacks or how we can do it better, what we can do differently. So we definitely appreciate that. And communication is ongoing, right? Of course. So we will continue to work on that. So any ideas anyone has, we have our planning email, and I'm sure there's questions. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say. I think that is about it. Director Beckett.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that, and Fred raised it with how impressed he was with the graphics on the the animals and the usage of the animals. When it comes to meeting my constituents on the boardwalk, any kind of graphic on any aspect of the zoning, proposed zoning bylaws and changes would be effective. And I was just trying to get my head wrapped around what that would look like for, lot sizes and building sizes and all of, docks and all the rest of it. I'm just saying that I am a visual learner, and the animal stuff was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, as Fred pointed out. So anything that you could do from a graphic standpoint in a show and tell, I think would be very helpful. Thank you. And I just have to say, as Penny already has, great work on this. It's been hopefully a labor of love for you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, Fred.
I've been following the bylaw changes for a couple of years now, way before I was a director, and that's kind of why I decided to become a director. The status of the October update is much more user-friendly, much more inclusive of what's currently happening. I think things are starting to go in the right direction, and the constituents are going to be a lot happier. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Susan, did you have anything here in the boardroom?
Yes, I just wanted to say the same thing. I really like the maps. They're really well done, and it helped me understand things a lot more. I think that you've done a really good job. Thank you.
On that note, I've already texted the mapping technician to make that little change, and then we will send out the maps especially for people online who didn't have printed copies. We'll send all the information out, including the presentation.
And the other thing, if any directors want like hard copies of the maps to take or bigger maps, like we can print them off at whatever size you need. So let us know. We're happy to provide those.
Great.
We do have a laminator.
Big thank you to all the planning staff for all the time and energy that's put into this important zoning bylaw draft. It has been an ongoing, a huge project for them. So, great job. There's always tweaks that'll happen. This is a living document, so it'll keep changing throughout history. But right now we have a recommendation, if someone would like to make that the Electoral Area Directors Committee receive the zoning bylaw review project November 2022 update and next steps. Moved by Fred, seconded by Bob. All in favor? Great, thank you. Okay, I overlooked earlier. Where is it? Sorry, the minutes. Received the Electoral Area Director Committee meeting minutes held July 27th, 2022. Can I have a motion to receive? Moved by Fred, seconded by Bob. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. And I don't believe there's any late business. Question period. Is there anyone in the public?
No, there are no questions from the public.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we need a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Fred. Thank you. Oh, Susan. I can see her from here. All right, all in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's it for today?
That is it for today. Thank you.
All
We will-
right.
Have a great afternoon.
You too. Okay, bye all.
Bye.